economy, the size of Uganda's economy expanded to Uganda shillings 162.7 trillion in financial 2021-22 from Uganda shillings 148.3 trillion in financial 2020-21, representing a growth rate of 4.7% in real terms from 3.5% from the previous financial year. This improvement in economic activity was higher than the targeted growth rate of 4.3% and was mainly credited to the full reopening of the economy in January 2022 following the COVID-19 pandemic lockdown measures. All three sectors of the economy registered growth in financial 2021-22 with a strong recovery in the industry and the service sectors. The service sector was still the largest contributor to GDP by 41.5%, followed by industry 26.8% and agriculture, forestry and the fishing sector with 24.1%. Inflation. Headline inflation remained modest in the first half of the fiscal year, but soared in the second half, averaging at 3.4% for the fiscal year, up from 2.5% in financial 2020-21. Core inflation declined to an average of 3.2% in financial 2021-22 from 3.5% in the previous year, remaining within the central bank's 5% target but higher than the targeted 3% in the financial 2020-22. Trade balance. The merchandise trade deficit widened further during the period under review as the export fell faster than imports. Export receipts declined by 27.3%, followed by a decline in maize and the tobacco export, much as there was growth in coffee earnings. Whereas the import bill fell by 14.3%, the merchandise trade deficit was recorded at 3,300 million US dollars in financial 2021-22, higher than the deficit of 3,045.4 million US dollars recorded in the previous year of 2020-21. Asia surpassed the East African community as Uganda's major trading partner in financial 2021-22, with a total trade of United States dollars of 3,489.3 million, up from United States dollars of 3,299.4 million in financial 2020-21. The European Union, Middle East, and the rest of Africa followed in that order. Foreign direct investment and remittances. Following the final investment decision in the oil and gas sector, foreign direct investment inflows increased by 32.4% to Uganda shillings 1,218.39 million US dollars from United States dollars 920 million.03 in financial 2020-21. Remittances from Ugandans living abroad total to United States dollars of 1,333.94 million, down from United States dollars 1,154.26 million from the previous year, due in the part to lower employment level in the migrant hosting community. International reserves. At the end of June 2022, the stock of international reserves stood at United States dollars 4,117.2 million US dollars, This was equivalent to 4.5 months of imports of goods and services. This reserve cover was lower than the 4.9 months of import cover recorded at the same time the previous year. Overall fiscal balance. The overall fiscal balance in financial year 2021-22 was a deficit of Uganda shillings 11,973 billion shillings, representing 7.4% of GDP, a deficit higher than the 6.4% of GDP target at the time of the budget and the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility. The fiscal deficit was largely financed from borrowing from the domestic market, which is generally non-concessional borrowing and contrary to government debt strategy. It's worth noting that external financing disbursements amounted to Uganda shillings 6,539 billion against a target of Uganda shillings 9,027 billion, representing a performance of 72.4% or less by Uganda shillings 2,487.6 billion. Honorable members, a fiscal deficit largely financed by domestic borrowing has a huge implication on the cost of doing business due to its effects of crowding out private sector in the credit market and consequently leading to higher interest rates or higher cost of capital. It's well known that one of the bottlenecks to development of private sector is the limited access to credit and high cost of capital. The credit available to private sector is characterized by higher lending interest rates, which has constrained the sustainable development of macro, small, and medium enterprises in Uganda. Revenue collection. Cumulative revenue collections, that is tax and non-tax revenue, for financial 2021-22 amounted to Uganda shillings 21,831.8 billion, against a target of Uganda shillings 22,425.35 billion, registering a deficit of 594.19 billion. This represents a 13.5 revenue to GDP ratio against a target of 13.8% as per the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility. In regards to a year-on-year comparison, revenue to GDP has grown by only 0.1% against the domestic revenue mobilization strategy annual growth target of Uganda of, I beg your pardon, of 0.7%. Revenue gains from tax policy measures amounted to Uganda shillings 510.9 billion against a target of 460.63 billion, while revenue gains from tax administration measures amounted to Uganda shillings 1,383.46 billion against a target of 799 billion. Tax expenditure. During the financial year 2021-22, the value of revenue foregone from tax expenditures was estimated to Uganda shillings 2,487.5 billion, or 1.56% of GDP, and 12.2% of tax collected. Compared to the financial year 2020-2021, tax expenditures grew by 15%. The largest share of the largest share of revenue foregone was from value-added tax at 47%, amounting to Uganda shillings 1,160.85 billion, which was 0.73% of GDP. Honorable members, revenue yields remain below its potential, with a revenue to GDP ratio of 13.5% in financial 2021-22 is still behind the regional peers. While estimates from a number of studies may be optimistic. They indicate that Uganda's existing tax policy and administration have leakages. Addressing areas of weakness in tax policy might bring some immediate gains. However, increasing tax revenue is not simply a case of adding new taxes or increasing tax rates, especially if increases are to be sustainable and fair. We are talking about members, I think you can read about the domestic revenue mobilization strategy highlights on those two paragraphs. We can move to debt sustainability. The stock of public debt increased from Uganda shillings 19.54 billion United States dollars, equivalent to 69,512 billions in June 2021 to United States dollars 20.98 billions, equivalent to 78,799 billions, representing 48.4% over the same period, performing within the threshold of the Charter for Fiscal Responsibility and the convergence criteria for East African Community Monetary Union, POTO. The increase in debt over the past few years has resulted into the deterioration of the risk of debt distress from low to moderate. In regards to debt service indicators, liquidity indicator, domestic interest payment to total revenue amounted to 12.7% in financial 2021-22, from 20.1% in the year 2020-2021, against the Charter for Fiscal Responsibility target of 15.2% in financial 2021-22. This development indicates that the target of 12.5% by financial 2025-26, members, I beg you, and yes, it is financial 2025-26, as per the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility, may not be achieved, and the ability for government to meet its obligation as and when they fall due is steadily deteriorating. According to the Charter for Fiscal Responsibility, to ensure Uganda's total debt exposure remains sustainable, the nominal publicly guaranteed debt to GDP should be maintained at below 5%. However, the current status of publicly guaranteed debt to GDP has not been provided. Government has projected debt to remain sustainable over the medium to long term, underpinned by high revenues following the implementation of domestic revenue mobilization strategy, as well as the onset of oil production. It's also noting that the key objective of domestic revenue mobilization strategy is to increase revenue as a share of GDP by 0.7% annually, and this has not currently been achieved. In addition, the risk to debt distress was found to deteriorate to moderate due to risks mostly attributed to shocks to the country's exports. However, exports declined by 27% in financial 2021-22 compared to the financial 2020. In the financial 2021-22, government programmed to borrow Uganda shillings 3,142 billion Uganda shillings, a target of 1.5% of GDP from the domestic market to finance its deficit. However, shillings 5,586, equivalent to 3.4% as a share of GDP, was actually borrowed from the domestic market, representing 177.8% performance, or Uganda shillings 2,443.3 over and above its target. As a result of this surge in domestic borrowing, yields on treasury instruments edged upwards, and consequently this could have sustained the high lending rates due to crowding out the private sector. It's worth noting that the non-performing loans in the banking sector as a percentage of total gross loans amounted to 5.32% in financial 2021-2022 compared to 4.79% registered in financial 2020-2021.
Chairman,
Yes.
I would guide that since you had already captured highlights in the main BFP report, you go to the recommendations.
Now, members,
then the whole statement will be captured on the Hansard for easy forum.
These are budget priorities, interventions. Members, you can read priority intervention to boost business is there. Priority intervention to enhance agro-industrialization. Priority intervention in the mining industry is there. Priority intervention in the oil and the gas industry is there. Priority intervention in transport infrastructure is there. Priority intervention in regard to enhancing digital transformation is also captured there. Priority intervention in regards to improving health services is there. Education is there. And also priority intervention in regards enhancing access to safe water and sanitation is captured. And the annual budget performance report for financial year 2021-22 and the table 15, which is attached of this report, provides some of the details of extent of achievement of some of priority interventions highlighted above. There is a recurrent expenditure, figures are there. Members, you can read. The development expenditure is also there. Domestic areas, like I alluded to it earlier, it's also captured. Environments, we've talked about environments, which was also done. Petroleum fund, it's there also captured. Then the performance of NDP 3 core projects, it's done, it's there, captured. The committee recommends that government should improve project selection, design, appraisal, and analysis before the project is approved and sanctioned for funding. So we have recommendations on resource mobilization. Members, you can read. Say establish clear policy guidance for the issuance, management, and monitoring of different tax exemptions and incentives. Fast track the review of DRMS in the view of the current economic challenges, and develop an effective implementation action plan for effective. Develop a national tax policy. Members, you can also read on the charter, the recommendations on the charter. The committee recommends that the budget for the short and medium term fully complies with Charter for Fiscal Responsibility requirements, and any deviation must be guided by Section 7 of the PFMA, inclusive of the reasons for deviation and the adjustments to be done to bring the nominal debt to GDP back to the Charter for Fiscal Responsibility path over the remaining financial years. Core projects, NDP core projects, there is need to review the NDP 3 core projects with a view of financing and implementing of this project so as to realize the NDP3 goals. Public debt, I've been talking about. There is a need for government to keep debt in sustainable paths while improving the composition of spending to create fiscal space to finance private investment, foster growth, and reduce poverty. We talk about fiscal consolidation. Those are measures. Government should significantly reduce on non-concessional financing unless the beneficiary project's rate of return exceeds its cost. Efforts to boost exports should be given a priority as means of minimizing vulnerabilities to debt sustainability. Domestic areas, members, we talked on the issue of domestic areas, and government has to clear domestic areas as the stock has increased. Improving the performance of external finance projects. We recommended effectively implement government projects selection criteria which ensure that only ready projects are selected from the pipeline of bankable projects in the integrated bank of projects for inclusion in the annual public investment plan and budget. We say public projects whose implementation is off track should be reviewed and refocused to achieve the intended objectives. In addition, projects should be vigorously evaluated at all levels through the Public Investment Management System Framework. We say only appraised projects should be admitted to the Public Investment Plan. Say an accommodative monetary policy stance should be maintained in order to revitalize business activities. We say we scale up the provision of affordable long-term financing by development financing institutions like Grand Development Bank or other government banks, Post Bank, Pride Microfinance. We recommend we promote foreign direct investments through well-developed industrial parks. That is the executive summary, and when you turn to page 15, that is introduction, that is the highlights, when the details now. When you move to page 16, there is a table for physical operations. Members can read. It talks about all that. 3.0, performance of revenue for financial year 2021.
But honorable, we agreed to stop on the executive summary.
So, right, honorable Speaker and members, that I beg to submit, and members should go through the detailed report. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Colleagues, you see, at first, the Chair and his committee had captured these as highlights within the budget framework paper report. But I guided that we need to pick them out so that it's a separate item for ease of reference. Before I go any further, there are requirements which we provided. Honorable Minister of Finance, kindly comply with Section 30 of the Climate Change Act before we move any further, because the Honorable Woman MP from Chiboga raised that very important point, and we have to ensure that we comply. Certificate for climate change compliance.
Thank you so much, Right Honorable Speaker. In accordance with Section 30 of the National Climate Change Act 2021, that requires the minister responsible for climate change, in consultation with the chairperson of the National Planning Authority, to issue a certificate certifying that the budget framework paper is responsive and contains adequate allocation of funding climate change measures and actions. Right Honourable Speaker, I beg to lay the certificate in compliance with that provision.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Minister. So now, colleagues, I want to guide on a few things. I warned you much earlier. I said I want to read through the Hansard of this debate, and I feel proud that the 11th Parliament can really submit on very substantive issues. These are not issues of forgery, of standing up and you say, I don't have a bridge in my constituency. This is, if you know you're not ready, I request you don't waste my time. Because if you received the report and you look at the budget framework paper report from the committee, is for the financial year 2023-2024 to 2027 to 2028, because this is an overall government strategy document, which is totally different from the ministerial policy statement. So I want us to have a very well-structured debate on the issue. Colleagues, when I was reading through the report, I saw a few things which need a clarification, and especially with the way our committees are formed. Now, the sector committees, which are processing program-based plans and budgets, left so much hanging when you read through the report. For example, the Committee on Finance, chaired by my able reader, Honorable Kefa, it should be the lead committee on the development plan implementation, but it did not interact with votes like Office of the President, Office of the Prime Minister, Ministry of Kampala and Metropolitan Affairs, Ministry of Local Governments, and even IGG who contribute to this program. But what brings it? What brings all this? It's because we have not yet realigned our committees to the new budgeting process. We are still on sector-based when the government has moved on to program-based. And that's why you saw the other day we were having an issue of KCCA roads, and the chairperson for physical infrastructure was saying we are already handling this matter, and the chairperson for presidential affairs saying we are also handling the same matter, because the program for infrastructure should be under the committee in charge of physical infrastructure. So I want to direct the Committee on Rules to please study this matter and report back to the House urgently, so that we can realign our systems here if we are to effectively process the budget. That gives me a ruling on the issue which I promised Lop that I would guide, because he had raised the conflict between Section 18 of the PFMA and Rule 145 Sub-Rule 3 of our Rules of Procedure. There is no conflict at all, because under the PFMA Schedule 3, the layout for the budget framework paper is clearly stated. It does not include half-year performance report for the current financial year. So that rule, there is no conflict. We don't need, it's all about just the timelines which he believed. Of course, it's good if we could know how the budget is performing by now, the current budget. But luckily enough, when we are going into details, because the ministerial policy statements will have all the related details to do with the budget, that's where the actual figures will be. And we shall be looking at the expenditure of MDAs in relation to the policy of the ministries, to see if it's in line with the policy of the ministries that they read. So today, I want us to have a very well-structured debate. A very well-structured debate. If you debate out of the structure, you will have made my work very difficult. after reading through the report, I want to guide that we structure our debate in the following manner. We shall have segments, 4 segments from what I've read in the report. If we capture 4 segments, we shall be good to go. The first segment will cover budget performance, including cross-cutting issues. And that is for the previous financial year. You see, the budget performance we've been waiting for, that is statutory, is for the previous financial year. Don't mix it with the one half-year performance for the current financial year. So under this, our debate will be around issues of program-based budgeting reform, which is on page 29 of the report of the Committee of Budget. That is the BFP report. We shall also have supplementary budgets, which are under page 30. Domestic areas under page 31. Effectiveness of industrialization strategy under page 33. And parish development model under page 38. That will be a first segment. I'll give it 45 minutes. If your debate is outside that, please, I will tell you to sit so that I allow others. Segment 2. I can see some of you warning each other. Segment 2, because you see, colleagues, why I'm doing this, I want whoever we refer to our Hansard in the future is able to say they were discussing a budget framework paper. But if it looks like Prime Minister's time when people are coming up to bring their issues in 1 minute, it won't help us. So, segment 2, it will cover economic management and the resource envelope. Now that one, if you go to the report, it's on page 22-24 of majority and page 4 of the minority reports. I will give it 1 hour. And I warned you on Wednesday that you better print out this report. So if you wanted to read from here, then you're in trouble. But if you made your notes, they better. Segment 3 will cover fiscal deficit financing. That's the revenue mobilization. This is on page 27-28 of the majority and page 3 of the minority reports. That's where we shall look at some of these funds, like the fuel levy and all that, road fund and all that. We shall look at them around that. I will give it 1 hour. Yes, even if we are sleep here, we want enough time for the BFP. Okay? Yes. And the final segment will be broad expenditure priorities for financial year 2023-2024, which are well captured and well debated in the various committees. I'll give it 30 minutes because on the municipal policy statement, this is where we shall have a much finer detail regarding these issues. So, oh, and the debate starts now. We are starting with segment 1, and I want to test you, colleagues. For now, I don't want to limit you on time.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker. I've listened to the various pieces of the reports which have been pieced together, and I know debating the document will not be easy for us. But allow me, Right Honorable Speaker, to comment on 3 items, and I'm seeking clarification when the Minister will be coming back to reply to the debate. First of all, the revenue to GDP ratio of 13.5% in the 2021 to 22 is behind the regional peer. And I would like to know, I would like to understand why we are behind the regional peer, and what are we doing to go back so that as a region we are seen to be in compliance with the best practice principles. Item 2, Chair, Speaker, I have observed that the Uganda existing tax policy is porous, which implies that it allows leakages through revenue foregone. And we all know that the tax exemption that we are giving some investors is taking a lot of revenue. And we need to understand if there are still companies, foreign companies or local companies, that are benefiting from the tax exemption, we need to know why and for how long. And how many are they? And why should they be privileged against others? And luckily enough, the Committee of Trade is coming up with a bill on competitiveness. Maybe this will help us to understand this issue. The third one, Right Honorable Speaker, domestic arrears has been the cancer in Uganda economy. Some years back, we came up with a structure of repayment, and we hope that over the years, we would absorb all the domestic arrears. And all of us now understand, however simple, however little economics, you can understand that these domestic arrears takes a lot of money so that the small companies cannot survive. Some of us who understand little economics, that's the implication. So, Right Honorable Speaker, I would like the Ministry of Finance to tell us how they are going to bring to this Parliament a structured, well-analyzed schedule or plan to repay domestic arrears, so that we can know that in the next 5 years we would have paid all the domestic arrears, and this is the cost. Speaker, these are my comments in the report which has just been given. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Soseo Gwar has done well. The last point fell into segment 1, and the first 2 fell into segment 3. But at least they are within, In short, colleagues, let me tell you why I'm doing this. Okay, we can allow the segments, to fall into the different segments out of one submission for easy flow. Okay, let's allow that. But you can see what I'm aiming at is simple. I don't want you to stand up here and you say, discussing the budget framework paper, and you tell me a small bridge in your constituency. That's what I'm trying to emphasize. If we can avoid domesticating the debate to our constituencies, this is a broad strategy. It's a broad strategy. That's what the budget framework paper is all about. So if you can be as broad as possible, then I will allow. So a procedure, I'll first handle this side, then I come back here.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker. First, I want to thank you for the guidance you have given to us to allow us debate in a structured manner. But the procedural matter I'm requiring you to give us guidance on relates to how the Honorable Cecilia Ogwal has submitted here. I understood as if you proposed that we are debating the budget framework paper, and yet the item that was mentioned by the clerk that we needed to dispose of is the report on the budget performance. I agree we have to move, but in terms of how we are moving, which question has been proposed for us? Is it on the budget performance using those parameters, or now we are into the budget framework paper which was already presented, so that then maybe the clerk can call it and debate it.
Sure. Thank you. That was an oversight on my side, because the way I mentioned it wasn't satisfactory according to rules. It needed the clerk to first call it, because we said we will do a joint debate of the 2 items. Thank you for that, for reminding me on that. So let's also call the statement, the item on BFP, so that we can jointly debate the 2 statements.
Item number 4 on the order paper, motion for adoption of the National Budget Framework Paper for the financial years 2023-24 to 2027-28. Debate ensues.
Thank you. Colleagues, if you remember, the motion was already presented. So since it was presented and we are just going on to debate, we don't have to present the motion once again. So the question for debate is that the House debates the report of the Committee on Budget Performance for Financial Year 2021-2022, and the House equally in the same line debates the report recommending for adoption of the National Budget Framework Paper for the financial year 2023-2024 to 2027-2028. Thank you. So let's proceed. Honorable Guzuli.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for proposing this important issue for debate. I thank the committee for the report too. But from their presentation, there's a perennial problem already. The perennial problem is that we are having fiscal deficit. And fiscal deficit is a problem of fiscal indiscipline. So when you have these problems reoccurring and yet the legal frameworks in place, this House must help to identify where the problem is. Mr. Speaker, each year we get Charter for Fiscal Responsibility. And this report has shown that we never comply with that.
Every 5 years, Honorable Korik. No.
Thank you. Thank you for your guidance. It shows that there is no compliance with the Charter for Fiscal Responsibility. Why am I saying that? Our chair for Budget Committee reported to this House that we have exceeded domestic borrowing by about 177%. And this domestic borrowing gets cleared by this House. Are we already satisfying the public out there that we are just a clearing house? With these glaring problems, the House goes and approves internal borrowing whose terms are always unfair, which eventually leads to distortion of the market. I think we must do more. Mr. Speaker, each year a budget framework paper is presented here. It is supposed to be accompanied by a certificate of equity, gender, and now climate change. I would have expected the committee to report on those aspects, but they have been very silent. We know roads are being built in this country and they are washed by rain. Nobody says something about that. We know there's no equity in this country. When you look at the budget for roads, all the money is going to one region and you are not addressing those issues of equity. I would implore the committee to do more. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, we are no longer mobilizing enough resources, as rightly observed by Honorable Shishili Ogwal. One of the reasons for that is low tax morale. And some of the low tax morale issues arise from how we manage our tax expenditures. Whereas we forego a lot of revenue, this revenue foregone does not necessarily benefit Ugandans. It is foreigners who benefit from tax incentives, and we abandon the ordinary people. Now that we have realized Uganda is losing a lot of money, 2-point-something trillion, literally annually, can we now qualify these tax expenditures and be able to report on how much the country is benefiting? A few days ago we had a report. According to the law, the Ministry of Finance is supposed to lay here details of who is benefiting from these tax expenditures. And that way we would be able to justify if these policies are in fact promoting industrialization in our industrial parks, and if the investments in industrial parks are justified. But because of lack of such a report, timely report, Mr. Speaker, we are always constrained to critically examine these matters. Lastly, I sit in the Committee of National Economy, where we handle grants and loans and other related matters. Mr. Speaker, I'm acutely aware during the COVID, a lot of resources came into the country during that financial year, which has been reported on as grants. One of the grants came from Global Fund. I also sit on Committee of Education. I'm acutely aware there were resources provided to support learning, and nobody has reported on where these grants have gone. As we talk now, schools are opening on 6, but educational materials which are aligned to the new curriculum are not supplied to schools. A number of DAT centers in secondary schools are not certified. Many schools have not registered. When are we going to deliver on these objectives? If then the goal of the budget was recovery, when are we going to recover the education sector? Already someone highlighted about the poor performance. And these are some of the messes we go through because we are not complying with the frameworks in place. I therefore want to submit that if we want to move this country forward, one, we must become disciplined and comply with the regulatory frameworks in place. Most importantly, finance should reign, I don't know what to call it. You should reign on how you manage expenditures and plan for domestic resource mobilization. As of now, it seems there is no clear plan. We're on a fishing expedition. You try here, if it doesn't work, you withdraw. You are moving everywhere, and we must consolidate that. I thank you.
Thank you. Now, colleagues, you see, the issue, when I was reading through the report, and I share the sentiments, and I believe also the ministers of finance, you know, this is the time when this job becomes very difficult with the demands we have every day and how we are putting them to task to ensure they explain. But I had a few issues which worried me. I read this report mostly yesterday on my journey back from my constituency. And what worried me is how much space, how much fiscal space, how much discretionary money we shall be having to look at. Apart from debt service and statutory expenditure, the money that is available, which you can say this one should go to roads, this one should go to... Because when I was checking, it is different because in the next financial year, they are projecting domestic revenue to grow by 3.280 trillion. Okay? From shilling 25.550 trillion in 2022-2023 to 28.831 in financial year 2023-2024, from what I got in the report. But now, what scared me was to find that discretionary allocation is declining by 2.5 trillion. Because you see, if we've increased in revenue, I would have expected that at least discretionary expenditure. Colleagues, this is money which is not yet tied. This is money where we can have room for juggling. Whereas the revenue side is increasing, the discretionary one is reducing. And it's a cause for worry. Then I'm like, So how will Parliament now be able, in its appropriation, without its appropriation powers, be able to move the minister when it is reducing from the one of last financial year to the one of today, of next financial year, despite us correcting more, or projecting to correct more revenue? And of course, I saw where most of the issue is in the first 4 months of this financial year. When I was checking, for every 100 shillings corrected, 37 was going to debt servicing. Okay? For every 1 million corrected, 370,000 was going to servicing debt. And yet, in the next financial year, we project a debt servicing to increase by even 1.4 trillion. Now that means for every around 1 million corrected, we shall end up having over 400,000 going into debt servicing. So that's where the most important worry is, and how best we can handle it. Honorable Roland, no, I said I would first start with this side, then I come here. Don't mind.
Thank you so much, Right Honorable Speaker.
Roland, I pick Jonathan, I pick Chiboga, I pick Achut, I pick Aaron, then I come here.
Thank you so much, Right Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity. My name is Roland Ndiomujenyi, and I represent the people of Ruchiga. Right Honorable Speaker, this budget, when we are processing the budget framework paper at committee level, I found it so interesting that...
oh, you're not a member of the budget committee?
No, I'm not.
If you're a member of the budget committee, please don't stand
I said committee level of infrastructure.
Yes.
At the infrastructure committee level, I found very interesting scenarios in this budget. First of all, as you have rightly said, the discretionary amounts for expenditure have reduced tremendously, and yet the budget, estimated budget is increasing from last year's financial year's budget to 49 trillion, 49 point something, almost 50 trillion. So this would mean that actually we are estimating amounts which we might not be intended to collect. And that once that scenario happens, then we will be like moving in a negative direction when it comes to economic recovery. Right Honorable Speaker, in October last year, the Ministry of Finance provided us with a book on debt position of the country. It was interesting to find a lot of money, so many loans which are dormant, which are not utilized. Some of those loans were emanating from the 1990s. In the book, there is a certain amount of a huge amount of loan, but it has never been utilized by the government, and yet we are paying interest on that loan. We are paying all those attendant costs of those loans. Right Honorable Speaker, I would urge, through you, I would request the Minister of Finance to come up with a report on the position of the loans that this country has borrowed and the status of those loans, what they are doing, and how we intend to reduce on the debt burden of this country. Right Honorable Speaker, the debt burden, both external and domestic loans, they are killing our economy. The interest payments, when you look in this year's budget, the interest payments are huge. You find every money that we collect from through Uganda Revenue Authority is almost going to pay the loans, both principal and interest. But what is important, Right Honorable Speaker, is for us to understand as legislators, what do these loans do? How are these loans so important to our country, to the extent that everything that we collect is going to pay the loans? I understand and I appreciate that there are certain sectors that require these loans for us to move ahead. But I think sometimes we just borrow for the sake of borrowing. Because once you have a loan that you have not utilized for 10, 20 years, it means in the first place it was not necessary. Right, Honorable Speaker, in addition to that, the budgeting for this financial year, the financial we are processing, it does not augur well with the, okay, both the other sectors, other committees, everyone in the country has not come to terms with program-based budgeting. And when you look at it, for example, in the infrastructure committee, we are having items for KCCA, for other sectors, and yet when you go to the presidential committee, affairs committee, those same items, Kampara, drainage, all that, were also this side. So there is a need to harmonize through Ministry of Finance, to harmonize the budgeting process, to ensure that what we are presenting is actually understandable, is true and accurate in terms of budgeting. Finally, Right Honourable Speaker, when we talk of fuel levies, when we were processing at a committee level, we realized that the Uganda Road Fund, which was supposed to be receiving 3.9 trillion in this financial year, was only given 486 billion to maintain our roads. Right Honourable Speaker, the Uganda Road Fund Act of 2008, which was passed by this Parliament, and is supposed to operationalize the 2G, the second generation funding for the Uganda Road Fund, has never been effected. And as a result, the amount of money that is supposed to go back to maintain the roads, where which roads we use to transport our goods, to access schools, to access everything, those roads are now impassable. The framers of the Uganda Road Fund Act were so wise to understand that road maintenance is very key. Every year, Right Honourable Speaker, roads are added on the stock through Ministry of Works, through UNRA, and the maintenance money for the roads is reducing every year. Instead of increasing it because of the increase in the stock of roads to be maintained, the money, Right Honourable Speaker, is reducing. I don't understand how that works logically, but I think as a Parliament, we need to look into that matter and ensure that the operationalization of Uganda Road Fund is done as soon as possible before we lose all the stock of the roads that we have so far constructed, that we have so far rehabilitated. I beg to submit, Right Honourable Speaker.
I would ask ICT, there are some parts of the report I will be requesting you to put up. For example, page 23 of the report, which has the resource envelope, because Honourable Roland has raised very important issues, colleagues. And of course, if you read the report very well, in the submissions by the Minister, we had a certain loophole. No, I shouldn't call it a loophole. We fell into a big hole during COVID. For financial year 2020 to 2021, we managed to get cash advances of around 3 trillion from Bank of Uganda, which we were not able to pay. And then government agreed with Bank of Uganda to carry it forward. 2021, 2022, paid 500 million. 2022, 2023, 1.25, like that. So, Minister, I really want to know whether that's the one which affected our resource envelope. 3 trillion is a lot of money. But again, colleagues, there are pronouncements we have to make ourselves here to do with the funds we created. For example, road fund, environmental fund, and all that. Now, and this is where I want us to be honest to each other. if you go to implement these funds, straight away you will take around nearly 6 trillion out of the budget, 5 to 6 trillion out of the budget. Out of the resource envelope, out of the discretionary, okay, when you look at around 18 trillion going into debt servicing, and then you have around 6 trillion going into statutory expenditure, salaries and all that, as an economy you will not survive. But the question is, the moment you have a law, you must implement it. So, what is the solution? The solution is very simple. Government, if this is not implementable, propose amendments to the law so that we stop breaking the law. It becomes difficult for me here because every budget we are passing every year, there is an irregularity of us failing to implement the law the way it is. So if the law has been a burden and we are not able, bring proposals, we amend. Other than that being, other than it looking like really nearly being a personal clash between honorable colleagues here on the floor. Let us be honest on that. Honorable Minister, you wanted to intervene right away? Because Honorable Roland has raised it well.
Yeah, Right Honorable Speaker, just to update you on the road fund.
No, on all funds under the law, not only the road fund.
Yeah, well, I had picked the road fund because he spent some time talking about the road fund. And I thought that I would update you about what we are doing.
Okay.
Yes. Following a debate that we had here on the matter, the Prime Minister and government are taking keen interest. In fact, we have looked at Section 21 of the road fund. In that provision, the measures for collecting revenues for financing the fund are properly laid out. And that provision states that the minister will, by statutory instrument, will actually cause those provisions to be implemented. We have taken note of that, and in a meeting coordinated by the Prime Minister, involving all the stakeholders, UNORA, Ministry of Works, Finance, and many of us, we have reviewed them, and we have come up with measures consistent with that provision, because the measures are already there. In fact, they don't require us to come to Parliament. It's a question of implementing them. But one important thing that we note, there has been emphasis that there's revenue collected by Ministry of Finance through the road fund, which is not being remitted to the fund. On fuel. The tax that we are collecting on fuel is actually excise duty. Section 21 of the road fund does not provide for excise duty. It provides for a levy on fuel. There's a difference between a levy on fuel and excise duty on fuel. Excise duty is collected under the Excise Duty Act. You see? So now we want to implement the levy as being proposed, together with other measures that have been proposed under that provision. So this is a matter in, under progress that we are discussing, and we have informed the Cabinet about it. So we are preparing a Cabinet paper. Once adopted, then we shall proceed. I thought that I should update the House that we are in agreement with what Honorable Roland is presenting to the House.
So, Honorable, what timeline are you giving this? And what is the implication? And what is the implication on the budget and also on the taxpayer?
We do hope that by the time we come back with detailed budget estimates, that we shall have come up with some measures. We shall have consulted the Cabinet on the matter and been guided by them on what to do.
No, he has not allowed the Honorable colleague. No, we don't use signs here. He knows how to speak. You know how to see. So please take your seat. I will allow you. I'll give you time to debate. Honorable, I will allow you, don't mind. Okay? Yeah. So, Honorable Jonathan Odul. Honorable, your
Thank
commitment is noted, and I
Thank you
will
very much.
specifically follow up with Honorable Rugorobi.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the first issue I want to debate on is the disparity on the public debt figures presented to us on page 17 of the report. Mr. Speaker, the Office of the Auditor General, it was noted, reported that the public debt stands at 86.6 trillion, and the budget framework paper reports 78.6. This is an understatement of our public debt by a value of around 8 trillion shillings.
As of when?
As of
Honorable?
June 2022.
Okay.
As of June 2022. Mr. Speaker, this essentially means that we are not being honest. And if I'm to use a more stronger word, there is actually fraud imputed in the budget framework paper. The implication of such under declaration means that whatever we are basing on as a country to project as our economy cannot be correct. And if we are understating our public debt by 8 trillion, it means even the debt to GDP ratio that we report to be sustainable cannot be correct, because we are using a faulty base figure to report to the country. That is deception. And the Ministry of Finance must explain this adequately. In fact, if that is the economics that was proposed to be the one that works, I think.
Procedure.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker. I rise painfully to put my good friend Honorable Dur on procedure, but Right Honorable Speaker, the issue Honorable Dur is raising is very critical. Every Ugandan out there, out of here or out of the country, is listening, and that figure is quite large. I am sure the BFP has presented a source of why they came out with that figure, but Honorable Dur is continuing to deliberate without quoting for us a source for us to believe that there is that disparity. Are we therefore proceeding right for him to continue his deliberation without giving us a source, so that we know that there's that big error in the budget framework paper?
Thank you. Honorable colleague, if you listen to the honorable member properly, he quoted the Auditor General's report. So I will seek the minister after to come and respond. Okay? He referred to the Auditor General.
Thank you very much. Additionally, this is the report that the figures I quoted is from the report of the Budget Committee as well. It is stated there as an issue. So, Mr. Speaker, the point I'm making is that if we use distorted figures in our budgeting processes, then as a country we are not honest enough, and whatever we present here cannot be the true reflection of the state of the economy in this country. The second point I would like to debate is on the revenue and expenditures captured on pages 19, 23, 24, and summarized in table 7 and table 10. In proper budgeting, you must be informed by the revenue mobilization and expenditure of the previous financial years. What we see reported is that in 2021-2022, and it was presented here, we managed a revenue and expenditure of 34.9 trillion shillings. 34.9 trillion shillings. The revenue growth has been captured and stated to be at 11%, meaning that we can only grow our revenue by about 3.5 trillion. If that is true, then why are we projecting our budget to 49.9 trillion? Yet we know just one financial year back, we were only able to generate 34.9 trillion. If we are to be honest, then we should have actually used that projection of growth of about 3.5 trillion that we grow with our revenue annually to be able to increase our budget by the same percentage. So in 2023-2024, our budget should be standing around 42 trillion shillings using that projection. So we are actually about 4 years ahead by using 49.9 trillion to budget. The third one is on the economic and budget strategy. The theme that has been given to the country is that agriculture, industrialization, services, and digital transformation will be the major drivers of the economy. But when you look at the allocation, it means there is completely a mismatch. Either the people who are proposing the budget theme are coming from another country, and then the people who are proposing the budget are actually coming from Uganda. How do you say that agriculture is the one you are going to use, and then you don't allocate any money to it? Are you speaking from the same? I don't think that will help us a lot. That is why, if I pick some projections from the budget figures, Mr. Speaker, you will even laugh. For example, to drive the economy in 2023-2024, the government proposes to buy 28 grinding mills for maize. 28 grinding mills for maize. 28, that is under agriculture. In the same year, the government proposes now to buy 5 milk coolers. 5 milk coolers. It's in the budget framework paper. In the same year, the government proposes to buy 200 tractors. By the number of districts, that is 1 tractor per district. So how do you then say agriculture is the one you are going to use as your major theme of the budget? The fourth issue, Mr. Speaker, is on the issue of equity. In section 9 of the PFMA, we are expected to do balanced development considering gender and equity issues. I have critically looked at the proposals, and this is also reflected, Mr. Speaker, in the national objectives of direct state principles, that whatever we propose, we must have a balance. And this is where I invite honorable members to pay critical attention. There are a number of projects that are listed in the budget framework paper. Have we inquired on how equitable those projects are going to go into the entire country? Because if the government proposes, I have picked a few, the health centers to be upgraded. Last year we did upgrades. This year we are going to do upgrades. But if you analyze, you will find that the upgrades are going to the same areas year in and year out. And others are just coming here to be lamenting. The boreholes have been proposed that you are going to drill 10,000 boreholes. We would like to see how those 10,000 boreholes are distributed across this country. The 1,200 water sources that are going to be repaired, and that means 8 per district. 8 boreholes are going to be repaired in your districts. 8. So if you have sub-counties, 10 sub-counties, I don't know how that will be dealt with. So I would like to propose and invite members that those list of projects that are listed in the BFP are brought here so that we can see how equitable it will be. The fifth point I would like to make is on the supplementary expenditures. Mr. Speaker, sir, 4.2 trillion shillings was reported as the total amount of supplementaries in 2021-2022. That is about 12% of our budget. If we are expending 12% in supplementaries, that means we have a problem with our budgeting. Because budgets are supposed to be able to forecast and see certain interventions well in advance. This is now the problem this House have to pay attention to, that every time we pass the budget, in the next quarter, you hear the Ministry of Finance saying we are doing budget suppression. And that budget suppression, members, it is not budget suppression. That is reappropriation that they go and do behind the back of Parliament. There is no way that after Parliament has just passed a budget, in the first 3 months, you say we are now doing budget suppression. They must always come back to this House and tell us what to do. Lastly, I want to comment on the program approach. This program approach, for me, is like putting a cart before the horse. If you speak to people who are in government, who are implementing these program approaches, they do not even understand. It is a duplication meant to cause confusion in the country, meant to dupe the country that something is being done, whereas nothing is being done. This program approach must be looked at critically. 20 programs But when you see the activities listed under them, you can compress them, Mr. Speaker, to about 3 or even 4 or even 5. So I invite members to look at it critically and ensure that we get balanced development. There are other 2 or 3 things, Mr. Speaker, but I'll come back to propose as an amendment, especially how the sectoral committee reports must be adopted alongside the budget framework paper. There's a lacuna in our rules that the budget committee now sits and receives the report of all other members of parliament under the sectoral committee, and they choose on what to report and what not to report. If you compare what the recommendations of the budget of the sectoral committees and you compare with what the budget committee has decided to pick, they have now become the godfathers to see what should go in and what should not go in. That should not be accepted by this House. So I propose that when you put the question, Mr. Speaker, when you put the question finally, that question must be that the report of the budget committee and the report of the sectoral committees be adopted together. I beg to submit.
Thank you. That's an issue. No, Honorable, there is no one on the floor. Please take your seat. Please. Honorable Mara, take your seat. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Correct the issue of the program-based budgeting and realigning our operations. You know, it's very, very critical. For example, we have 20 program areas. Now, the Committee on Natural Resources alone has 4 out of 20. Okay? The program on mineral development, the program on sustainable energy resources, the program on sustainable development of petroleum resources, and the program on climate change, natural resource, environment, and water management. Now, if one committee has 4 programs, what about other committees? You're saying this is what I was telling you earlier on, that we must realign. But the issue which Honorable Jonathan O'Doul has raised, it can even be administrative in terms of us as presiding officers guiding committee chairpersons, that when you're presenting this report, attach also sector committee reports for ease of reference for members. But a very important issue has been raised in the discrepancy on debt, on reporting of our debt stock. I think before we go any further, we need a very quick answer, because even me, when I was reading it, I got a bit concerned, because, Honourable Minister, do you want to mean that you don't have one clear framework which you agree upon, as this is the framework for reporting the national debt as a government? Do you want, for example, to say that on your side, you did not include Bank of Uganda advances and the areas, and then the Auditor General included them? So that's where the confusion was. Honourable Minister, first clarify on that before we go any further.
Honourable Speaker, you rightly put it. The disparity between the 2 figures was caused largely by the fact that the Auditor General actually in his figure includes arrears and Bank of Uganda cash advances, which we don't. It's a matter that has just emerged, which requires that the 2 of us reconcile, you know, the way we define public debt and what it constitutes public debt. It's a simple matter. We are sorry that this happened, but we hope that we shall reconcile it and use the same parameters to define public debt going forward.
The Auditor General is an official of government. Agree on a clear framework of reporting public debt. Because if you have 3 trillion, if you have around 2-point-something trillion, which you agreed with Bank of Uganda, that you're going to be paying 1.25 trillion per year, and you're even budgeting it for it, then you're recognizing it as a debt. Capture it as a debt. If so and so supplied the government and has a contract and you must pay, when you don't pay, he will take you to court, win, and even you pay him with interest and damages and legal fees. Capture it as debt. It's a debt. Yes. And I'm glad you've agreed to that.
Right, Honorable Speaker. And I think the minister, we benefit from these two ministers. They were once chairpersons of Budget Committee and Committee of Finance. And so they've been with us for quite a number of years. They know these issues Honorable Ugoro used to spearhead them for correct reporting of public debt. It is so critical that we report the right figure because it impacts on other parameters. Now, he knows they want to dispute Bank of Uganda advances, but they know they are supposed to pay back within a given time frame. If you fail to reimburse, then they become advances. Once they become advances, they are a liability, and they even attract interest. It's not just paying back. They even pay interest to Bank of Uganda. Therefore, they are part of our national debt. Areas, by all means, people who have supplied you, consumed their goods, you have not paid. Do you owe them money? How do you calculate your debt obligation and you say you don't owe me money? So it's not a question of whether you went to Harvard School of Economics or London School of Economics. It is the school of common sense of economics, which I know Honorable Gorobi is a big scholar of common sense economics. So you cannot deny.
Honorable Chivumbi,
Therefore,
this is very clear.
Yeah, my bone of contention that this is public debt. The other element they are not reporting, and for me it is critical, is our contingency liability. Because contingency liability, to an extent, they are also part of our own obligations. Because they will tell you contingency liability are just films, but you are going to redeem money for Lubowa, and you are budgeting for it. You are going to redeem this amount of money. And our contingency liability today stand at 160 trillion. And for me, these need to come into the public realm. And we know how much debt we have as a country. And the Ministry of Finance has been shy in reporting these figures. Right, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. Where we've agreed, colleagues, on this matter, the Minister has conceded. You're going to realign so that you have the same, you speak the same language. You capture every debt that you do have. You don't wait for the Auditor General. So, what is the procedure matter? I'll first go here a bit. Yes, let me pick here. Otherwise, the people here are going to sleep, so I need them to, yeah. Then I come back.
Mr. Speaker, the procedural issue I'm raising is, in light of the Honorable Minister admitting that the figures they have presented here are faulty, and they impute what the Honorable colleague talked about, an element of fraud. Wouldn't it be right that we allow them to go and reconcile those figures such that this House moves from an informed point of view? Because we may mislead the country on wrong figures, and tomorrow we are going to be blamed as representatives of the people. Kindly guide. Thank you.
Thank you. The moment you talk of fraud, then you don't have reconciliation. You have prison. But the budget framework paper approved by this House is the final one. And this House has corrected that error, has captured the right figure as provided by the Auditor General. So what is important is Honorable colleague, allow the Speaker to do his work. Okay? So what is important is ensuring that this does not happen again. But I wouldn't, it wasn't flawed. It was uncoordinated. You wanted to clarify it, Honorable Minister? Yeah. But don't open more.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, the use of the word fraud, I think is very disturbing and should be expunged. because the figures we are not presenting, actually, within our accounts, national accounts, instead that they are presented differently. And when you go to vote 130, you'll actually find them. It was only a question of interpretation when the Auditor General was presenting his final report. But the figures are properly captured by Ministry of Finance. There's no money lost whatsoever. And I would beg that the use of the term fraud, I think that one should be expunged from the Hansard. Mr. Speaker, I beg.
Thank you, colleagues. The language I had was near fraud, not fraud. So since they've not said there was fraud, yes, Rob. Colleagues, I want members to debate. I want us to give members a chance.
Thank you, Right Honourable Speaker. Of course, I exploited your kind indulgence. As a matter of procedure, I remember you instructed this House, the Committee in particular of Budget, to report to Parliament on performance of all loan obligations, so that before we pass the budget, we take care of nugatory obligations that are pending around finance. I don't know, Right Honourable Speaker, whether it wouldn't be prudent for that report to be brought within this realm of time before we consider the policy statements, so that we have an understanding of which entities, which MDAs are sitting with obligations idly on resources and requesting for more. Right Honourable Speaker.
Thank you. Honourable colleague, the Committee on National Economy presented two reports. One, performance of the economy, and performance of loans. I don't know, Rope is telling me it was not conclusive. So what I will do, I will go, I will review what is there. If we find it was not conclusive, the chairperson, National Economy, chairperson, your committee, was it conclusive or not? You're here. And Honorable Guzuri is here to testify.
Thank you, Right Honourable Speaker. I'm happy that, Right Honourable, you were once a member of National Economy, and we have never produced a conclusive report on the performance of loans, because we are talking about over 70 loans. And we made it clear in our report that with the time, we shall keep updating Parliament and reporting on specific loans. But we presented the financial performance, but we are unable to present on physical performance of all those loans. So it wasn't conclusive.
Yeah, Honorable, you're trying to be technical. Huh? Physical performance, he wants to go to the field. Okay? But you see, financial performance, when we are looking at the performance of these loans, we usually look at the disbursements, because the disbursements are made against certificates. Certificates are issued against physical performance. Okay? So they are related. I don't want us to complicate these things, okay? Yeah. So, Honorable Chair, if you know your committee needs to update its report to make it conclusive, ask for time, I give it to you. You do it before the policy statements you present.
Thank you very much, Right Honourable Speaker. Right Honourable Speaker, my committee is very ready to accomplish that task once it is funded. Because a lot of work calls for oversight, going to the field, so that we really report and we don't have issues with members of Parliament here that what we are reporting about is not what is on ground. So once funded, we are ready even tomorrow.
So let me give a clear directive on this. Committee on National Economy, you don't need to visit each and every project which is funded by Iran. We have sectoral committees, they have been visiting these projects. We have some of the oversight committees, they have been visiting these projects. Pick out a few critical projects. Okay? Pick out a few critical projects and write to me tomorrow. We look at funding for them and you do a report. Because your report, Ropa just reminded me here, it's mandatory. You don't have an option. Okay? And you are all a committee of national economy. It's not an oversight committee. It's not an oversight committee. Oversight committees are provided for and are chaired by opposition. Okay? So you're required under Rule 178, Sub Rule 2C, to assess annually the performance of loans and guarantees approved by Parliament. Please, Chairman, do that.
Much obliged.
Yes.
Right,
and I need a report within 2 weeks. Okay? So I'll go to
procedure.
Yes, if you know a member of the committee,
Procedure.
please don't interfere.
Procedure.
Okay? I'll do Honorable Kambari Ferigo. I have Erda. I have...
Procedure, Mr. Speaker.
I'm still picking colleagues to speak. Yes. I have Bungoko. I have Kashari. I'm going to pick you, Honorable colleagues. Let me first pick those 5. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, Honorable. You had a procedure matter, Honorable?
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker. Since we are correcting discrepancies with figures, I've also been able to keenly look at some discrepancies which I'll seek your indulgence on. I understand, Right Honorable,
that doesn't follow under procedure. You will raise it when you're debating. Okay.
Right Honorable.
Yes.
Because it's regarding one of the legal requirements, which is on equity and gender compliance. Right Honorable Speaker, when you look at page 14 of the budget framework paper, there are tables that show our gender and equity responsiveness for the 20 programs. And Right Honorable Speaker, you'll notice that our overall compliance percentages for the National Budget Framework Paper 2022-2023 and 2023-2024 are not correct. While the report says that 70%, we are 70% compliant for the financial year 2022-2023, the correct figure is 67.55%. And also, while it says that we are also at 53% gender and equity compliant for the financial year 2023-2024, it is only 41.05%. The procedural matter, Right Honorable Speaker, is whether with these compliance figures we are debating compliantly. Thank you.
Now, I was fearing that you are going to call it fraud. Honorable Chair of the committee, on the issues raised by Honorable Court.
Yeah, Right Honorable Speaker, we've gone through these numbers and we base our assessment on the reports from Equal Opportunities Commission. So I need to check again and see. But what we reported is what we got.
So, Clerk, can you, I'm sure Clerk Budget Committee should be here. So can you avail those figures, those certificates? Because you see, what a member has not quoted his source. Okay? I don't know whether he had it in his head or whether he has a copy of the document, of the certificates, and he lays here.
Right on.
Reports.
I had access to the reports that were available on our portal as Parliament.
Clerk, can you, yes, Clerk, can you avail us with the report so that we correct the record, okay? But let's progress before we vote before we call for a vote on the motion, we shall get time, we clarify that. Please, technical people, do help the chair of the committee. Yes, Honorable Ferigo.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker. As you did guide on the budget performance 2021-2022, there was an item of regarding domestic arrears. The report indicated that we need to come up with serious penalties. And I want to emphasize this, Right Honorable Speaker. Auditor General reports over time are showing increasing numbers, increasing figures when it comes to domestic arrears. There is a system in place for all accounting officers to minimize domestic arrears, and they have done it deliberately, not to enforce commitment control system. And when these domestic arrears keep on increasing, they attract interest rates, and it therefore brings big expenditure on side of government. I want to agree with the report that the penalty should be serious penalties so that we don't keep going into these domestic arrears. For the budget framework paper 2023-24, this I'm uncomfortable with the projected domestic revenue, raising it from 25 trillion to 28 trillion. Right Honorable Speaker, I was on the television today, Commissioner General, giving us figures of the performance of the last 6 months. For the last 6 months, he did not hit the target of 100%. Instead of around 12.5 trillion, he collected 11 trillion. That implies, if we are to take the figures in the budget framework paper, pushing it from 25 trillion to 28 trillion, we are saying that next financial year, we are, instead of collecting 11 trillion that has just been realized, we are likely to collect 14 trillion half a year. And this is not realistic. If we are to go into realistic budgeting, sincerely speaking, let's base on the performance of the previous year. This performance is now with us. I am yet to be convinced on the basis why we should raise our domestic revenue from 25 trillion to 28 trillion, yet the half-year performance has indicated that instead of 12.5 trillion, we are with 11 trillion shillings. I want to hear from the colleagues why they are over-projecting, even when the performance is indicating that there is some level of underperformance. I want to submit, Right Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable. Yes.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker. For record purposes, my name is Joram Twasima, and I represent old persons of Western Uganda. I raised to talk about my constituency. You know, you have said we should not talk about constituency, but Western region is a very big constituency.
No, your constituency is national.
Okay.
The elder are national.
Okay. So I rise up to talk about, first of all, to appreciate government for paying sage to the old persons in this country. However, I want to say that I have come across the report of Gender, Labor and Social Development, and I have come across the Auditor's General report as at June 2022. The old persons still have not been paid 5.1 billion shillings. I have also corroborated this one with the budget framework paper. For the year 2023-24, only 24 billion has been provided for the whole year. Remember, we have a debt of 5.1 billion. So if you remove 5.1 from 24 billion, you remain with approximately 19 billion for the whole year. For this financial year, the provision was 120.7 billion shillings, which is supposed to cover the whole year. Secondly, government had already promised to pay a special grant to all the persons between 60 years and 79 of 5 billion shillings for this financial year.
Now, Honorable Joram, without interrupting you much, you see, your submission is in line with the ministerial policy statement.
Yes.
Which is covering clear expenditure in line with government policy. Okay? To see whether the expenditure by the MDAs is in line with the policies of government. But now at this stage, we are looking at strategy. That is why I told you from the beginning, the budget framework paper, if you read on the report, it says for the financial year 2023-2024 to financial year 2027-2028. It's a long-term strategy. So I request that this issue of yours, we raise it, since it is specific to constituency, we raise it when we are debating the ministerial policy statement. At this stage, it cannot apply.
Thank you.
I thought you said
Thank you very much,
No,
Right Honourable Speaker.
Then Kashari.
Bungoko, please.
Thank you very much, Right Honourable Speaker. And I also want to thank the Chair Budget for the presentation of the motion. And he indicated the issue of revenue yields in the country being below its real potential within the region. And definitely that raises a lot of issues, because it is the issue that culminates into partly the high public debt, which is 48.4%, and the issue of the escalating domestic arrears. But also suggested a solution of domestic revenue mobilization. And when they are doing this, as much as it is vigorously being done, Right Honourable Speaker, there is a challenge that is very vivid, especially the people that are appointed to partly collect some of these revenues. For example, the VAT and the withholding tax. Because at the end of the day, someone is appointed to do the collection, but at the end of the day, they are being given, and then others are not given the time to collect. So at the end of the day, those who are agents, they suffer a lot in regard to they are submitting, because their prices are higher than the others who are not agents. So this suffocates these other businesses, which are owed to also be. So when we talk about the tax, let's talk about tax widening, not tax deepening, because you deepen and suffocate those who are already compliant, and at the end of the day, they cannot compete because others are left at large. And this is a big challenge as we talk about domestic revenue mobilization. Right Honourable Speaker, another issue that was clear was the escalation of the domestic arrears, which actually is illegal, but it is being done. And that can still be checked out, especially by the Ministry of Finance, particularly by prioritizing expenditure. We were presented with here with the issue of the road fund, and then the contractors who have not been paid. And it was so sad that per annum the interest is 80 billion shillings. That's just on interest because the money is not being paid. Now, if we are talking about there is no money, why can't we also prioritize and pay this so that we avoid that we can avoid? So that goes back to the issues of prioritization of expenditures in face of the limited resources we are collecting as a nation. And finally, Right Honorable Speaker, I want to also speak about the issue of long-term financing by financial banks, which has already been recommended, especially to the business community. I agree and I appreciate the government for putting an institution like the Uganda Development Bank. But this bank is only known here in Kampala and only to big business people. And here, when we talk about people who are sustaining this economy, are not these big people. It is a collection of these small businesses around the country. So why can't the services of Uganda Development Bank be decentralized so that they go to regions? So, and then the resources that they provide and the services is available to those local businesses so that they also appreciate and be partakers of the national cake, and they will be able, so that they able also make their contribution, especially in the payment of taxes. Thank you very much. I beg to submit.
Thank you, Kashonji.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker. For record purposes, my name is Tayewa Habat, Member of Parliament, Kashonji constituency in Chirhura. Right Honorable Speaker, I want to comment on budget performance 2021-2022. Budget performance is not about balancing incomes against expenditure. The performance is the reflection of the impact it has in our country areas. Right Honorable Speaker, I got an opportunity by this House. I was put in a committee which was analyze or critically analyze the releases sent to local governments. And I did that exercise. I looked at the Appropriation Act, what this Parliament appropriates against what Ministry of Finance has given to local government as releases to the local governments. There is a very big disparity. There is a very big disparity from the Appropriation Act. Actually, what we appropriate with what is actually released had a disparity over 3 trillion. Right Honorable Speaker, and we know that these local governments are the ones who implement most of the development projects which actually put up our people. Right Honorable Speaker, I would like this government take the rule of the thumb. Now, the rule of the thumb says that you will never grow rich if your consumption expenditure is above your income, unless if you steal. Now, what happens is this, that this government spends, and where it spends is not a priority that is actually an investment that generates revenue. And this revenue, we should be responsible to cover the debts or the amounts we borrow. That's why every time we borrow money and continue with an ability to pay this money through resource mobilization. So I would wish that the government checks itself, prioritizes whatever money we spend on should not be consumptive, should actually be investment, and in investment that is going to generate that revenue that is able to pay back what we borrow over time. I thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Pachuto.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker. Right Honorable Speaker, I want to give my view on in areas of resource mobilization and fiscal deficit financing. Right Honorable Speaker, I want to thank the committee where they recommend that there is need for better tax policies and tax administration. However, Right Honorable Speaker, I think that we have over-concentrated as a country on issues of taxation without looking into how these taxes are affecting the businesses in the country. It is high time that we look at policies that promote growth and development and sustainability of these businesses, so that the government can reap from the multiplier effects that these mushrooming and developed businesses could have on the economy. Right Honorable Speaker, protect me, Right Honorable Speaker.
Please, you're protected, Honorable Korir.
Yeah, thank you, Right Honorable Speaker. Right Honorable Speaker, the other thing that I wanted to talk about is, Right Honorable Speaker, when we look at the issue of fiscal deficit, much of what is collected when you analyze go to debt payment, mainly external debt payment. But Right Honorable Speaker, it is time as a country, as this parliament, that we look to areas where we can, generate foreign exchange that will leverage our foreign reserves. And that, Right Honorable Speaker, I want to appeal to this House that when the time comes for when we look at the final budget, we deliberately put more money in areas where where it can promote export promotion and import substitution. Because these will not only generate jobs for our people, but our farmers will have their raw materials uptaken by these manufacturings of factories, Right Honorable Speaker. There is need for us to focus more on export promotion and import substitution, Right Honorable Speaker, as a strategy for development. Right Honorable Speaker, the other thing I want to talk about is in terms of mobilizing long-term savings. Right Honorable Speaker, we have a lot of potential in this country that we have not fully exploited. Right Honorable Speaker, look at our stock exchange market. It is totally underdeveloped. When we met Capital Market Authority as Committee of Finance, they are investing a lot of their money in equity. Companies here are investing outside the country. And yet, if we pull those resources in the country, probably we'll have more available resources at our disposal to invest in the economy. Right Honorable Speaker, finally, Right Honorable Speaker, somebody has mentioned here, I think it is time. Right Honorable Speaker, I think it is time beginning next financial year that as a country, as a people of this country, we look at, and leaders of this country, we address our mind in areas of reducing public expenditure, Right Honorable Speaker. Non-critical public expenditure. Right Honorable Speaker, as you live here, you get amazed at the number of lead cars escorting non-criminals, I believe. You wonder, one car in front, another on the side, another, and you wonder, who is this being escorted like this? Is he a criminal? And if he's a criminal, why is he outside Luzira?
Is the Deputy Speaker being escorted?
No, Right Honorable Speaker, for you deserve it. But some of these people in government, you wonder. You really wonder. And that kind of vehicles have to move every day. Then you wonder why there should be leaders or even CEOs or whatever in these offices. Right Honorable Speaker, I think we need to really think on how much the country is bleeding through such expenditure. I thank you, Right Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. So Honorable Pachito is raising a point of being frugal. Yeah, being frugal. And colleagues, you see, I'm happy you're bringing out issues of resource mobilization, because when you look at us telling a minister, add this MDA money, add here money, add here, where is the money coming from? Honorable Gorobi, even if he sold whatever he has, you get it? So when we are looking at unfunded priorities, and we are saying add here money, I think we need to identify properly. You have some sectors whereby if you put money, you are unlocking the potential of that sector to generate more money for you. But then, like tourism, a very good example being tourism. When you look, you expect tourists to come to Uganda without advertising Uganda. When everywhere you go, you see Kenya in front of everyone, you see South Africa in front of everyone. you look at just the domestic flights between Nairobi and Mombasa, between Nairobi and Masai Mara. The visitors that visit Masai Mara is more a national park. Are visitors that do, you know, someone was explaining to me about Mount Rwenzori. When you look at the visitors who go to Mount Rwenzori, you compare to visitors going to our neighboring mountains, which don't have anything to show. But because they've been able to build facilities, you know, someone tells you climbing Mount Rwenzori is deadly, is extremely deadly, so I can't go because of that. But that's what everyone would want to go look at its beauty, but no facilities. So it's, instead of taking that risk, they go to a neighboring country and they visit. Then, but also the little money you have, which methods do you use? A very good example. Why do we continue with this kind of bidding, for example, for roads? This road, this building, instead of competition? Because competition will bring out the best. You know? EPC, this engineering, procurement, and construction contracts, you lose a lot of money the moment you don't allow competition. Subjected competition, and the moment you get a price out of competition, okay? Even if in between you have projected the price, and you say, oh, okay, the lowest bidder had put in around 20 billion, then you cancel the procurement process and you give it to the person you want. But at least you had a clear projection. But this business of a blank check, we've given you, for example, a road, so you go, determine its price, determine the design, any money you want we shall give you. You even get a loan on our behalf. Some of them are about to supervise themselves. I mean, that's not the right way you will address, that's not the right way you would behave if you're facing financial challenges. When I face Nakut, I'm coming this way. Then I go.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker. I will speak on 3 issues, beginning with the one Honorable Jane Pachuto left, on the issue of encouraging public-private partnerships so that Ugandans that have resources can get practically involved in development. It's that they don't invest their money home. As a strategy, we could look at that as something to invest in. We have a unit in the Ministry of Finance that handles that. So as a strategy, let's put in our focus on that area too, to encourage our growth, organic growth, so that borrowing can reduce. The other issue, on page 38 and 39, concerning the parish development model. Yes, it is a good issue. Concerning the parish development model, the committee recommends that the local governments provide business advisory. It is recognition that for the parish development model to succeed, for the people who are given money to succeed in trade, that means their business mind must be supported. They must be supported on entrepreneurship. Right Honorable Speaker, that pillar 7 of the parish development model talks about the mindset change. Now, unfortunately, the bigger portion of resources that go to the mindset change concentrating on the social mind. And that's why a bigger portion of that envelope sits with the Ministry of Gender. I am thinking that we are not addressing the real thing. The PDM is supposed to address economic change. And so in terms of strategy, we should equally, with equal measure, focus on the entrepreneurship mind. Not using the local governments, but using a competent agency. That's right, Honorable Speaker, you know we have. A competent agency that can do entrepreneurship development for all our parishes in the country. We need to focus there. Last year, Right Honorable Speaker, the enterprise Uganda asked for 87 billion to do that work. We gave them only 12 billion. Now they're asking for 70 something. We're not even ready to give them that one. And yet we are investing 1 trillion for parish development. Without the business mind, the entrepreneurship mind, it is very likely our people can waste that money. The third issue I wish to comment on is on education. Page 35. The committee recommends increasing funding for education. Right Honorable Speaker, in terms of strategy or a framework, we made a mistake last year, a good mistake though, because our teachers are now happy. We increased salaries for teachers, science teachers, and at the same time, the Ministry of Education had opened up recruitment. So they interviewed and got 5,000 teachers. But these teachers could not be deployed to all the schools in the country because of the salary. So the little, in terms of usage of the envelope that we have, the Parliament, we made a mistake. We need to see if that mistake cannot be corrected because of legal implications, then we must find a solution for these 5,000 teachers to be recruited. We have schools, Right Honorable Speaker, that cannot operate. Seed secondary schools in the country are open, but they cannot operate. They are not teachers. The Ministry of Education cannot deploy because they can't afford the increase. We increased the salaries by over 400%. The Ministry of Education cannot afford. So as a Parliament, we need to support. If we say we're increasing salaries, we need to think broadly in that area also to cater for deployment so that these schools are utilized. I submit, Right Honorable.
Thank you. Yes, I'm speaking out. Yes, Uopa, Honorable Martin Muzare. I'll pick Honorable Max Antion, Budget Committee. Is one of the budget experts we have in this country. He first, yes. Then Honorable Gwari and Honorable Choma.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker.
I'm going to pick you, colleagues. We are here, we are going to ensure we discuss. Yeah.
Right Honorable Speaker, I prepared my notes and unfortunately I've been let down by technology. So my submission will be limited to what I was able to recall and also pick a bit while the chairperson of the Budget Committee was making his presentation. First and foremost, Right Honorable Speaker, I want to start with the issue that was talked about here regarding the funds created by this House. And Right Honorable Speaker, you did indicate that if we operationalize the fund, we will take away about 6 to 8 trillion shillings for those activities as per the fund. And members, I don't want you to be derailed from thinking that this money goes into cham-cham. Right Honorable Speaker.
What is cham-cham? That's
wastage.
Oh, very good.
Right Honorable Speaker, in order for us to actually improve on the economic base of our populations in the countryside, in the community, we need roads. The agricultural sector, we have to have roads so that our people are able to move their produce from where they are growing it to the market. If you don't have the road network, then most of the people have to lose out on what they would actually earn. Secondly, Right Honorable Speaker, is electricity. There is supposed to be an energy fund. We are all grappling with lack of electricity in our communities. Some areas, poles were taken, they are on the ground. Some areas, poles were taken, they are up, no wires. Why? Because REA was disbanded, and we got into now the challenge of going through the bureaucracy to access funds for some of these programs. So, Right Honorable Speaker, the 6 trillion that you are talking about as going off is actually to improve infrastructure in this country. How much do we need for the road network? How much do we need for the rural electrification agency to extend electricity to our communities? If we spent 6-8 trillion, for me I would be happy, because at the end of the day we know that that would have a multiplier effect. We even have communities that produce agricultural products where they would be actually adding value to their produce. But they are not able to establish even cottage industries because of lack of access to electricity. Right Honorable Speaker, when you look at the tourism sector, however much this country advertises, when tourists are dying on our roads, that is a negative. Uganda is rated as the 2nd most dangerous country to come to if you're a tourist. Yes. Yes, after Ethiopia. Because of the road accidents. And why are we having these road accidents, Right Honorable Speaker? We have narrow roads, we have talked here. We have roads that are not well maintained. We don't have easy access to the tourist sites. Imagine that a tourist flies into this country and has to drive for 8 hours to reach Bwindi, or 9 hours. When you go to Tanzania, you just fly. Within 30 minutes or 40 minutes, you have reached Serengeti from Nairobi. When you arrive in Nairobi, Right Honorable Speaker, now Nairobi has put up an expressway. What happens within 30 minutes? You have reached the national park. So easy access, easy and secure access is the way to go. We have been crying about the standard gauge railway, Right Honorable Speaker. We have been crying about our road network. So however much we put money in the tourism sector, Right Honorable Speaker, without dealing with those negative factors, we are actually wasting our time, Right Honorable Speaker. Thirdly, Right Honorable Speaker, there is a lot of wastage in this country. When you are talking about prioritization, this parliament does the appropriation. It is our responsibility to do the appropriation. Are we doing our work as members of parliament? Or we are leaving the front bench to have its way? Yesterday, Right Honorable Speaker, I was listening to TV. Can you imagine? No, sorry, I was watching. No, but I was listening as well. Because you don't just watch, you listen to what was being said. Even if I don't watch, but I am listening to what is going on TV. So, Right Honorable Speaker, you appropriate money to an entity like National Medical Stores. The drugs are procured, but there are no funds to transport these drugs from the National Medical Stores to your districts. And that is the reason why there is a delay of 1 month, failure by the National Medical Stores to take drugs because they don't have the operational funds. How many women have we lost in these hospitals because of lack of just basic things which they cannot afford to buy? How many men have we lost? How many children have we lost, Right Honorable Speaker? We have the Uganda blood transfusion services. Children are dying because of lack of blood. We have no factory for blood. The factories are the people. The people are mobilized to provide blood, and people do respond. But they don't have the reagents to process this blood. So what are we doing, Right Honorable Speaker? There is a lot of money wasted in this country in corruption. Listening to the IGG talking the other time, she said the country last year, I think we lost about 8 trillion shillings. But instead of focusing on locking those taps, we are now all being duped and getting excited about rationalization. As if that is what is going to help us. How much are we going to save out of the rationalization? We had Ministry of Works constructing the roads. We had challenges and created UNRWA. Now we want to disband UNRWA so that we go back to Ministry of Works. As if the engineers there are going to, be comfortable with the small pay that we are going to pay them. We are just going to move corruption back into the ministry. Some of you could have seen some of the roads under Usmid. I think it was in Apache, Usmid. In Apache district, the municipality showed the work, and I'm sure somebody has already given a certificate. Why are our roads not lasting? You put up a road, just after 1 year you have potholes, and the government has to redo that. But we are here, rationalization, let us save money, honorable colleagues. Creating unemployment to people while we are increasing other sectors which are not productive. Increasing personnel in other areas that are not of help. So, Right Honorable Speaker, the Honorable Yanyima wants to give me information, but Honorable Yanyima, yes. Okay, let me take it, Right Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker. The road in question of Ismid in Apache, which this LC1 chairman was trying to peel, and it was peeling off, it was done by Abubakari company, which has been recently, quietly, behind our backs, been given 30 billion shillings. That's a local company working on that road that was quietly, out of our budget, was given 30 billion shillings. I beg to inform you.
Thank you very much for that information. Right Honorable Speaker, this country loses lots of funds because of the illicit financial flows. I've only talked about corruption. We've talked here about the tax expenditures. It's the executive that actually comes up with these proposals. And here we approve them. I want to request. We attract investors to this country. Some come and get those tax exemptions, Right Honorable Speaker, operate without paying taxes, and afterwards close and relocate to another country. Who has lost? We are the ones who have lost. I think in 2021, the report indicated that this country lost about 2.8 trillion in illicit financial flows. So these are areas that we must actually look at. So I want to end, Right Honorable Speaker, in the interest of time, that we also have to look at the tax base in this country. We need to broaden the areas. We have about 40, I don't know 40 what million Ugandans now. And between age 1 and 19, we have about 24 million Ugandans. Implying that close to 60%, when I add the elderly, about 60% of the Ugandans are actually not contributing to this economy. They are dependents. And only about 30 or maybe 40% are the ones shouldering the bigger burden of all Ugandans. When I look at the education sector, I just cry for this country. We have a report coming up on the school fees issue, following the motion that I presented. Right Honorable Speaker, the parents out there are struggling to have their children get quality education. And where are they getting the quality education? In private schools. What has happened to to these government primary schools in our communities where majority of us went. You cannot find them performing well today.
Honorable, can you conclude? We have other colleagues who need to make a contribution.
So, Right Honorable Speaker, the Education Act talks about an education tax. Have we looked at that option? Even if you taxed a Ugandan 10,000 shillings per annum to contribute to the education fund, it would add something. We are talking about the health sector. We've cried about the National Health Insurance Scheme. It is not there. And yet, majority of Ugandans, when they go to the hospitals for health care, they have to pay. So if we are to support this economy, we must broaden the tax base, but also, most importantly, bring more people into this, what the president keeps talking about, the money economy, so that they can contribute to the development of this country.
You.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. Now, the Honorable colleague has raised very, very critical issues. But one issue that stood out, especially, is the issue to do with merger, which is reflected in the budget framework paper before Parliament plays its role. Because I think we need, Honourable Minister, you will need to classify. We have mergers which can only happen by resolutions of Parliament. Those ones which are on your side, okay, by statutory instruments and all that, those ones we don't have power. But those ones which are established by acts of Parliament, there is no way we shall run a budget, we shall process a budget which is processing merger before we pronounce ourselves. That's against our rules of anticipation. So if you want to do merger, bring your proposals quickly by the time we finish budgeting. But now we shall have a very big discrepancy between the budget framework paper and the ministerial policy statement and the actual budget, because as long as we have not yet completed the process of merging any entity, that entity we shall provide for it in the budget. So I think that should be, that should be very clear. I was sharing with Honorable Chivumbi some of the quick issues which we needed to sort out. For example, on areas, if the law is very clear, that an accounting officer cannot engage, cannot commit government without funds, where are areas coming from? Where are areas coming from? How do we, colleagues, process a ministerial policy statement that has gaps on wage, and yet wage is a statutory requirement? And we find ourselves coming for a supplementary on wage, which is a statutory requirement that was very, very clear. How did you recruit if you had no money? Okay? So I think these are areas where we need to pronounce ourselves properly. And Honourable Minister, I request you, don't bring us a ministerial policy statement that has an unfunded priority called the wage. If you have not approved the wage, you don't allow it to even someone to capture it as an unfunded priority, because wage is statutory. And then we also agree no supplements on supplementary budget on wage. Pension, pension, gratuity. I mean, we are breaking the law in broad daylight. But also, colleagues, I want to guide and chair committee. I want your committee to work out with the Minister for Finance. I want to know, how do the rest of the countries report public debt? How do the rest of the countries report? We can use our East African colleagues. How do they report public wage? Reason being, we must account for everything, but I don't want us to use a system which will affect our credit rating and made us uncompetitive. Because you'll for example, if you find a neighboring country does not consider Bank of Uganda advances, does not consider areas under wage, but under contingents, and contingents is not captured under public debt, okay? Then the moment you do it, the debt to GDP ratio of our country will extremely go high in a minute, and your credit rating goes down, you're no longer attracting affordable money, and you find the neighboring country is reporting in a different mechanism. So do we have either World Bank or IMF guidance on how we report public debt? How does Kenya do it? How does Tanzania do it?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Arising from your question, I wish to give this information to the House. And I beg your indulgence that I give some background because the issue was, raised here a while ago. Mr. Speaker, BOU financing, we don't treat it as debt. We treat it as arrears. And this is on account of the following, that if we treat it as debt, it would imply that contingent liabilities, including the arrears, would all be treated as debt. We would also pay interest and principal on them. Secondly, we are not operating in isolation. Now I come to a point. Our debt is computed using the same template as other countries use. If we start including things that shouldn't be there, we shall be shooting ourselves in the foot, in the sense that our debt levels will be exaggerated. This will affect our credit rating and thus raise our borrowing costs. Mr. Speaker, we are not in an island. We operate in the region. And in the region, all other countries do not include advances in their debt numbers. Advances and other contingent liabilities are not included in the debt numbers. I thank you.
So let me request colleagues, okay, that this is an issue which the committee can go back and look at and confirm. Yes, because the moment that's the standard of reporting. Now the question will be, doesn't the Auditor General know about this? Why would the Auditor General raise it? Because you see, the MPs in the report were quoting the Auditor General's report. So you as government, you need to have coordinated troop movement. And then Bank of Uganda. So the committee, please go and ensure you reconcile on this, and you will update the House. I'm sure it shouldn't be an issue for debate. So I had allowed Honorable Martin Muzare, and then Honorable Max Ochai, and then Honorable Gwai. Don't mind, and then Choma. I'll come back. But colleagues, now you can see MP colleagues want to speak. All of us. So let's be mindful of time.
Okay. Thank you, Right Honourable Speaker. Right Honourable Speaker, you guided well on the composition of domestic debt. Right Honourable Speaker, I'm worried about my district, or the district. Right Honourable Speaker, most of the districts are soaked in debt. They have cases that have actually run for almost decades. And the creditors are actually picking assets of those districts. Most of the money that is sent at the district are conditional grants, whereby districts are unable to pick that money and pay these creditors. Right Honourable Speaker, the guidance that you made here, that this money constitutes into a local debt, it should not only just stop there, but to make it clear that as Minister of Finance should find a way to help districts clear these debts. Because in my district, recently they picked a grader because of some cases that have been on for decades. If we don't come in and save these districts, Right Honorable Speaker, it's a very big challenge. Not only that, Right Honorable Speaker, service providers who are not considered in this case have lost their properties. Right Honorable Speaker, while you were chairing this House last week, you gave a promise that we shall look into this matter to save the local contractors who are demanding government. And as I tell you now, they are listening because they have a lot of hope in this House. They are waiting for the pronouncement from this House on how they will be paid, because a good number of them have lost their assets. Right Honorable Speaker, on what we are looking at today, we are looking at the issue of trade balance, where exports fell short by 27.3%. Right Honorable Speaker, we have entities like the Export Promotion Board. We have URI. It's called Uganda Industrial what? Research Institute. The export that we are talking about is majorly on local items like maize, tobacco. That alone explains that we've not improved in the industrial sector. Right Honorable Speaker, it is a time that we do an evaluation on some of these entities, like the Industrial Research Institute, how much has contributed to this country. Do we have value for money? Right Honorable Speaker,
Honorable,
the Export Promotion Board?
We shall tackle that when the issue of merger comes here.
Okay.
So, yes.
Well, thank you so much.
This is not for BFP.
Right Honorable Speaker, lastly, in the interest of time, there are proposals which are very good on budgetary priorities, interventions. And one of them is the mining industry. Right Honorable Speaker, in this sector, a bigger number of investors in this industry are just, I don't know how to call it, but there is nothing much that is being done in that industry. Yet there is a lot of wealth in that industry. We have so many minerals in this country that could be able to bail us in this physical deficit that we are in as a country. But most of them are holding just exploration licenses, and therefore it is high time that government comes in to bail this industry so that it becomes productive and it contributes to the national economy. Right Honorable Speaker, lastly, it talks about agriculture, to enhance agricultural industrialization, agro-industrialization. As my colleague, one of them has already said it here, it's just a peanut that is being invested in there. I don't know whether these peanuts we talk about can really do much in changing the face of this country economically. Right Honorable Speaker, it is high time this country focuses on things that can really change the financial status of this country. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Max Sochai.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity given. And I want to take the same opportunity to thank the Committee of Budget for the reports and honorable members for the debate so far. From a macroeconomic perspective, Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to make quick comments, one on the budget performance, focusing specifically on the fiscal operations, and then on the program approach, both in planning and budgeting. Before I make those comments, Mr. Speaker, allow me to quickly say a word or two on the public debt, as well as the road fund and other funds. On public debt, Mr. Speaker, I think the discrepancy on the figures presented here are largely because of the methodology adopted in computation of the debt figures. And suffice it for me to say, Mr. Speaker, that public debt is not an accounting tool. Rather, it's an economic management tool. And therefore, the definition of public debt limits itself to the Government Financial Statistics Manual of the IMF 2014. I would therefore encourage Minister of Finance in their submission to us soon to ensure that they actually present us with the definition of public debt as we use in Uganda, as well as in the East African Community countries. On road fund and other funds, Mr. Speaker, sir, as you observed yourself in the introductory statement, that implementation of road fund and other funds would constrain further and limit our fiscal space. I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that the delayed implementation of the road fund has been informed by good economics.
Point of order.
Order. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you. Right Honorable Speaker, the road fund was an act brought to this House by the government. It has not been operationalized because of the Ministry of Finance, where he was a director. Is the honorable member in order, after frustrating this fund from being operational, is he in order to come here and tell us that having this fund would constrain this country when he has been writing letters to UNRWA to tarmac his road from Tororo through Nagongera to Sorwe? Is the member in order to come and confuse this House, Right Honorable Speaker, when the Attorney General properly guided on the road fund, and the Minister even indicated that they are trying to find ways of having this fund operation? Is he in order?
Thank you. Number one, Honorable colleague, I don't have any information on record that Honorable Max Ochai frustrated operationalization of the road fund. We can only hold the minister accountable here. We don't know how they operate because we don't go in deeply. But number two, Honorable colleagues, I had raised it earlier. Once we have a law, as long as that law is still on our law books, it exists, it must be implemented. Okay? We cannot come here and we say, you cannot implement it because it will constrain A, B, C, D. I think what is important was what I raised earlier on. When I said that government, this was your law. Okay? If you have been constrained in implementing it, bring amendments here. Bring amendments. So, Honorable Max, the line should be that one, but not saying we cannot implement, yet we are required to implement by law. Okay? So, kindly proceed.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker, and thank you so much for giving me guidance on moving forward. Mr. Speaker, sir, as I was saying, in good economic management system, anything else under the current Treasury single account system that might undermine and lead to policy reversal and push us back to the macroeconomic instability of the 1980s and early 1990s would actually not be advisable for us to adopt. And so I would expect my colleagues from Ministry of Finance, where I was, but not as somebody says I was, that they give us a technical view of operationalization of the road fund, taking the legal aspect into consideration as a priority, and then the rest will fall in line. That said, now back to my own comments on the budget performance. Mr. Speaker, sir, when you look at the table on fiscal operations, I observe, since that table is supposed to be consistent and stable, I observe unaccounted for 1.6 trillion Uganda shillings. And I wonder whether Minister of Finance did not find it necessary to explain to us whether there was an overstatement in terms of expenditures or the outflows, or an understatement in terms of the inflows, particularly the revenues. And so I would want us to correct that. It is table 7, where we have errors and omissions amounting to 1.564 trillion Uganda shillings. That's huge sum of money. Can you account for that, Minister of Finance? Then my last concern is on the program approach. Mr. Speaker, sir, the program approach in Uganda was adopted to further enhance allocative efficiency. I remember saying this point last time, and I want to insist. The program-based planning, as well as the program approach in budgeting, is aimed at enhancing efficiency in utilization of our resources. Not on allocation, but even utilization of our resources. Unfortunately, as of now, we see we are bent merely on rationalization of agencies, and we forget rationalization of ministries to fit within the program approach. I'm also glad, Mr. Speaker, you have taken into consideration the need to rationalize our sessional committees. That will go a long way in ensuring that the appropriation is done efficiently. And also, oversight tomorrow will be done efficiently. I therefore call upon Minister of Finance to consider not only rationalizing agencies, but also ministries. Take, for example, Minister of Energy and Mineral Development. Under that, we have a host of programs. Minister of Lands, Housing and Urban Development. We have a host of programs. Minister of Trade and Industry and Cooperatives. We have about 3 programs. It is high time for us to ensure that we benefited from the program approach. And that actually calls for the executive to consider not only agencies to be restructured and save money, but also to restructure ministries as well to save money. I thank you.
Thank you. Now, I think that's very critical. Colleagues, if we are having 20 program areas, what are other ministries doing? and you find one ministry is covering 3 already. For example, Ministry of Energy is covering mineral development, sustainable energy resources, sustainable development of petroleum resources out of the 20 areas. So it means we shouldn't be having more than 20 ministries, if you're saying. Because if the programs are already covered, what are the rest of the ministries covering? I think. So I had allowed Honorable Gwan.
Thank you very much, Right Honourable Speaker.
Because for us, we are going to rationalize our committees here to fit within the programs. Let Honorable Gorobi clarify, then Honorable Gwari comes in.
Mr. Speaker, I think there is a serious problem of interpretation here. When you have industry under industry, and we are talking about a program to do with industrialization, it does not mean that it's Ministry of Industry alone that is responsible for that program. You're actually looking at various players around industrialization. For example, you could have the ministry itself, but you could also have other agencies that contribute towards industrialization. For the construction of an industrial park, for example, you need electricity there, so you need the electricity agencies, energy. You need water, so you need the water agencies involved. You know, so many other players are involved, environment, etc. So it's not enough to say that because we have Ministry of Industry and in the program we are talking about industrialization, therefore it all belongs to Ministry of Industry. You know, I think it is much broader when it comes to talking about programs. When you talk about minerals, you'll actually find that Ministry of Works is involved in terms of providing access. When you talk about tourism, it's not about the Ministry of Tourism alone. There are so many other players that get together to deliver tourism for this country. So I thought that the context should be clearly understood.
Thank you. But, Honourable Minister, there is no program that works in isolation. Okay? Government does not work in silos. It's integrated. So, programs support each other. Now, instead of you, because this is your own work, okay? This is your own work. And that's why you're merging. The honorable member is saying, before you talk of merging agencies, also see of merging ministries, because ministries are taking more money than agencies, okay? And you have identified 20 areas which support each other. Now, this area of security will support area of industrialization to ensure that industries have security. Okay? So it works together. It's not, but we are waiting for your merger report. Okay? Then we shall also see whether we need to merge government. But luckily enough, we shall not merge opposition with Jonathan Oduro has refused already. Yes, Honorable Gwari.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker. And I thank the Chair for his presentation. Mine, let me build on the area of program, as you had correctly identified, needing for it to be reworked on. My contribution is that we should consider ways of strengthening the coordinating program head, the ones who are heading those programs. What I've found out is that they don't have that clout of being able to coordinate other areas of the investment ministries properly. We possibly need to strengthen that area. Right Honourable Speaker, I'll mainly talk on the strategy which has been well highlighted, which is ensuring that the private sector is able to make very important contributions towards the development of the country. And in doing that, there are critical things which we should ensure that we invest so that the private sector can be able to do its job. By private sector, I'm meaning that part of the economy which is not government. So it is a little bit broader. And we have correctly, the paper correctly looks at cost of finance. Cost of finance is real key, and I'm happy that with the planned budget, I see the domestic borrowing actually reducing. So I'm happy with that. That hopefully starting next financial year, the domestic borrowing is going to reduce according to the figures. However, we need to note, why are the costs of finances high? It's mainly, if you look at what the commercial banks say, one critical thing is risk. So let's look at what are we going to do and invest to ensure that the risks reduce. The other is the cost of their own borrowing and the cost of production. So I would be interested in knowing how Minister of Finance is going to work harder to ensure that we reduce credit. The other issue is transport cost, Right Honourable Speaker and colleagues. Colleagues, in 2014, that was data of 2014, where I used to stay in a traffic jam for 45 minutes when you are coming for work, and almost 45 minutes when you are going to work, when you are leaving work. That created a situation that we were sitting in 2014 in traffic jam for 52 days in a year. 52 days you are sitting in traffic jam. That is the extent of the challenge of traffic jam. So we need to put resources to address that. We need to put resources to address that. And I'm happy when you look at, say, distribution, if you're in the production sector. Distribution currently within the city center is taking up to 10% of the cost of your production. Distributing costs in a city center should not go beyond 4%. So you can see where challenges which the private sector are having and which we must work hard to ensure that we invest and address. If you look at road network, and I'm saying network, sometimes these roads are not a network. They stand alone. And you see Ministry of Works always, all of us are quoting kilometers of roads which we have covered. For proper support of the private sector, you must ensure whatever you are developing in roads, one, are you reducing time of travel? Two, are you reducing costs of fuel? Are you reducing that? Three, are you actually reducing the distance? Allow me, Right Honourable Speaker, to give an example of a road which may be around my place for this case. One road which we always say is to support a road from Namasale to Dokolo and then reaching wherever Tuke and so on. That area, if you did that, you will reduce the transport cost if you pass through the lake by 164 kilometers. You will reduce the usage of fuel by 60%. That is what we should plan as we plan these investments. The other issue on these roads is the rural road support network. If you do not have a good rural support network, and I'm supposed to use the good road to bring my produce from Lira from Lira to Kampala, what will happen is I will use border, I will use those kind of things to ferry the items to Lira town where I will get the good roads. And I will incur costs related with storage. Now, if you have good rural roads, you are able to plan your truck to go to the rural area and go straight where the market is. So establishment and planning of roads should take that into consideration. So I was looking at investment on rural areas, and we're talking of the issue of 1 billion or 1.5 billion. I'm tracing it, and it is hard to find. They told me, go to Duka, you will find it there. As I said, I would have loved to see it under road fund. But let it be there. Let's invest onto the roads. Then you come to electricity. That one I think colleagues have elaborated. Let me not go into details of that. But when you look at the investment which is there, 638 million for access is in the document. But it says it is only 10%. It will cover only 10%, which is 1 million connections opposed to 10 million. That makes us think, colleagues, we should really prioritize some of these investments. And my view is we prioritize roads now, and then we continue, we use the access money and then continuously prioritize electricity so that we catch up with the time. Sorry? Access. There is inside our documents. The other one, Right Honourable Speaker, in the transport area is air cargo. Air cargo is very key. But I see there are two elements. There is air cargo, is it Uganda air cargo investments, mainly for the military. And then also investments under Uganda Airlines. It is important to have cargo, but let's see, can they be merged? Should we have investment in the air cargo? It is in our document which we are looking at. Let us examine that if we can have a change. Then the parish development model. Right, Honourable Speaker, one of the strategies which we should attempt to do is to ensure that, one, governments work together, but also governments work with other economic players like the private sector in the planning and in the implementation of everything. The private sector may be suspicious of government, but if you bring them together, they will be able to give views which will help, and we will tap on their resources. I would want to see a day where government spends 30 shillings, but the private sector or other persons bring 70 shillings so that we cover these financing-related issues. It is the trust which we should have and good plan which we must put in place which will facilitate that. We need to do that in the planning. And I see it clearly in the digital space. I looked at the digital transformation, and government is talking about itself. We are not looking at how we're going to support the private sector who are supporting the youth with this digital transformation. We need to look at how to have those government. And in the parish development model, one of the things which I saw is a problem. It is good the issue of PDC financing is key. However, how do you choose enterprises? These enterprises must be supported with private sector for bigger market. We all went to, most of us went to Dubai. Most, I said most. Most of us went to Dubai. But when I went to Dubai, and as has been reported, I got the persons who want eggs, for example. They want white-shelled eggs, yellow yolk, but they want one 40-foot container every 2 weeks. So you are talking of eggs, for example. You are talking of beef, which is good. So you cannot do it with enterprise selection, 1-2 persons in one area. So we need to work in a way that we bring the private sector in and to support that development. That one I think we'll have a bigger paper later. Chair, lastly is revenue mobilization. Chair, revenue mobilization does not take place in Ministry of Finance. Okay. Revenue is not got in Ministry of Finance. It is not got in URA. It is got from the private sector. Let us support the private sector to be able to provide this revenue. That is my biggest appeal.
Thank you.
Chair, allow me on the tax exemption, the other alternative document which was there. In the minority report, we talk and make almost near devil some of the investors who have been supported with tax exemption. Colleagues, we are all looking for international money. We are all looking for international money. When that money comes, actually you start saying they are not paying because they have come. Maybe they wouldn't come at all if those incentives are not there. So let us look at that. And these incentives, let us make them clear and we benefit from them. I can tell you, Honorable Speaker, colleagues, you can have all these tax incentives if you invest in your hometown, which is not a municipality, only 350 million. You will be tax exempt. You will enjoy all those issues. But the most important thing is the macroeconomic situation which you have is interest rates. In other economies, it is easy for you to say you will not say have exemption on income. In those economies, the interest rates is sometimes 2%. In this economy of ours, the interest rate is 18%. So money which you have made, it is good for you to be encouraged to reinvest in that money. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Choma.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker.
Colleagues usually say I limit you so much on time. Today I wanted to, but whoever reads today's answer will really be proud of this house. People who are saying we don't have brains here, they'll be shocked once they read today's answer. So, Honorable Choma.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity, and I thank the committee for the report. Right Honorable Speaker, it would be important.
Let's listen to one another, colleagues.
To actually comment on the budget performance for the financial year 2022-2023. But the fact that the minister could not provide the performance of the 2 quarters in terms of expenditures, that one limits our discussion. However, it puts a question to the minister to find out the basis, because you know we are in program budgeting. Where did he base to come up with the proposed figures? The fact that he could not provide the performance outturn for the first 2 quarters, or at least the first quarter, so that he would base on that. The fact that there is that limitation, let me talk about the government debt stock, Right Honorable Speaker and colleagues. It is on page 18. Right Honorable Speaker, my biggest concern is how much of a shilling that we receive as revenue that is committed to infrastructure, roads, schools, water for irrigation, water for domestic consumption, wages, and the rest. That is my biggest concern. And when I was making an analysis, I have clearly established that for whatever shilling that is earned in terms of revenue, not only revenue, by the way, Right Honorable Speaker, also borrowing. What we borrow, what we collect as revenue, whatever we collect and put in one basket, 55% of every shilling goes for commitments, paying debts, paying interest, and the like. And we only remain with 45%. In other words, to put it simple, more than half of what we collect goes for commitments, and less than half goes for really development and consumption purposes, which is quite alarming. When you go to page 18, Right Honorable Speaker, you would actually see that that is an analysis for 2022. You would actually see that the appetite for domestic borrowing is more than the appetite for foreign borrowing. And Right Honorable Speaker, you put it clear, and actually you were wondering whether our credit rating has gone down. This is indicative, Right Honorable Speaker, that by now we are no longer appealing to borrow externally. We go for domestic borrowing, and it is very, very dangerous. One, when we borrow less from the foreign markets, foreign borrowing, that means we are losing out on grants and concessions. That's where there is cheap credit. When we borrow domestically or internally, it means that we are actually crowding out the private sector. Government is competing with these other businessmen. When they compete, what happens? The cost of borrowing will go high for the investors, small or big. What happens? Then it will definitely imply that the profits will go low. What will follow? They will start devising means of actually downsizing the costs, which will even include laying off workers, and eventually we will even lose out on the revenue, Right Honorable Speaker. Right Honorable Speaker, I was also about to be happy, my colleague who has just mentioned, that we are reducing domestic borrowing. But this is not the case. When you go to page 23, Right Honorable Speaker, you will read domestic domestic borrowing, and you would think it is about 1.5 trillion, which would be good news. But when you move down, there is domestic refinancing, moreover. But I've already mentioned external financing. The possibility is that actually even this refinancing is from the domestic market, which worsens the situation. Now, contrary to what my brother Honorable Musasa has said, leave alone really the format. When we borrow from Bank of Uganda, we are borrowing from reserves, and we must pay back. We can't say this is not a debt; it is a debt, and interest. You look at it; it is even mentioned. It is even mentioned. I don't know why you leave alone the other format. But look, sometimes we need to be wiser than academic. Where it is indicated, the total revenue, it is actually 24. After getting what would be available, you are subtracting interest payments. That is a commitment. Then you are also subtracting domestic debt payment, Bank of Uganda. It is a debt. And actually, precisely, the Right Honourable Speaker, what remains as a discretionary, out of 49 trillion, it is only around 22, and this is what is meant for electricity, roads, standard gauge railway, domestic, rather PDM, Emyoga, in Ibanda and other districts. It is too small for every shilling to find that you are committing 55%, more than half, to paying the commitments. It is quite absurd, but now what do we do to get out of this? Going forward, perhaps we can have revenue at our disposal for development purposes. Now I go to the minority report. For the first time, I want to agree with the shadow minister, because this is where I'm seeing some ray of hope. We need really to take advantage of this report. Look at exemptions. Right, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Gwara has gone out. I know he is very passionate with the private sector. Me too, actually. But where you find that a single company can benefit from corporation tax, benefits from other forms of taxes, right, Honourable Speaker and colleagues, a company cannot pay corporation tax if it has not made what? Profits. If it has made profits, why can't it pay the tax? He just made the Right Honourable Shadow Minister, he just made a sample to the tune of more than 500 billion, that is more than half a trillion. But he was saying, if you go in details, it can even be a trillion. I understand. In a circumstance where you actually give exemptions, and this company, where you can tap some benefits out of this company, for example, increase the employment, okay? Then after some time, taxes, you cannot have exemptions forever. And then we are crying of shortfalls in revenue. So, Right Honourable Speaker, I think we need to study the report of the Shadow Minister critically and get a solution out of this. To the Minister now. Let me take the information from
but Honourable, I need you to conclude because you have other colleagues who would want to conclude.
Thank you so much. I want to make some information. Actually, we need to understand as Parliament that these investors do not pay tax. Tax is paid by the final consumer. If it is indirect tax, it is paid by that one who buys. If it is corporation tax, it is paid by that one who buys, and you make a profit, and out of that profit, that's why you pay tax. So why are you exempted?
Thank you very much, Honorable Herbert Tayebwa. Actually, you are now swindling the tax that has been paid by the ultimate consumer. You are giving it to the investor. pay as you earn. Just imagine, you are paying pay as you earn. You are paying salaries on behalf of an investor. So I think we should consider this minority report very seriously. And to this effect, I want to find out from the minister, it is by statute that you should be providing this parliament with the quarterly reports. At the end of every quarter, you should be giving us the updates of those who have benefited from yes, it is exactly. So, where are those reports? Secondly, now that we are, no, I'm asking the minister.
Please, Honorable, let it not be an interaction between you and colleagues. This is a clear submission.
Then for this year, for these BFPs we are discussing, can you avail the parliament with a list of those you think will be the beneficiaries in the tax exemptions for the financial year 2023, 2024, such as parliament, we discuss them, because it is constitutional actually. That is Article 159. It is constitutional that we should be deliberating on them from here.
Thank you,
I thank you, Right Honorable.
Thank you. Achut. Oh, no. Let me start with Christine, then I go to Honorable Achut. I had picked these two areas. Colleagues, if we can be quick, I'll pick more of you, because I want us to conclude at 7.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity. Right Honorable Speaker, also allow me to congratulate ourselves upon having accessed the first ever climate change compliance certificate for our budget framework paper. Thank you for the guidance, Right Honorable Speaker. Right Honorable Speaker, I also looked at the document and identified that too much sourcing, the revenue we are looking at, we are over-emphasizing the collections from taxation. Our people down there are requesting us to identify some more alternatives. We are doing less. We thought this budget framework paper would also advise us, let's expedite the sourcing of revenue from some other avenues. Taxation, yes, but let's expedite other mechanisms. And this is also affecting our local government so much, to the extent that the only revenue is cutting forests and probably quarrying stones. We need to help our local governments generate local revenues, because the potentials are many. And then the external financing. The baskets are many. Very many people are interested in helping us. We are the Pearl of Africa. Very many people are interested in expediting our potential in minerals, our potential in tourism. But the way we sell ourselves, the way we have packaged ourselves, is not funded. We have not funded our package, our brand. Wherever you go, you find others have already reached somewhere. Then, Right Honorable Speaker, on 23rd, when they presented the budget framework paper with the gender certificate, if you looked at the gender certificate, there are sectors that had scored 0 by then, meaning that some of those principles of gender equity, including inclusiveness, were missing. But when you look at the programs and sectors that had scored 0, that is where we expected our population to derive sustenance. And one of them is mineral development, scored 0. IT, others had 30, below 20. Now I'm wondering what happened from that time to now. Have they improved? That their budgets are going to be considered? The same applies today. Now, climate change certificate. We have scored 60, but we do not have the marking scheme. Based on what? And the 60 is applying to the entire budget framework paper. What is happening to the independent sectors? So we need to look at this before the budget framework paper and the cycle is accomplished. Right Honorable Speaker, the issue of program-based budgeting is very important. That is why, instead of looking at sectors, instead of looking at sectors, we are looking at institutions. Protecting ERA, protecting NFA, protecting what? Let's focus on programs. I will bring out the issue of parish development model. We have failed to budget in line with our population. Right now, if somebody asks you, how much is that budget going to translate into somebody's livelihood, you can scratch your head to the last when you have not responded. The parish development model is based on geographical locations, not people. Yet we are aiming at transforming people's livelihoods. We have already failed somehow. But we pray that we correct this mistake probably as we go along with the project and program. And Right Honorable Speaker, we have identified the most important challenge concerning corruption. We have lost a lot of money in corruption, and most of the institutions can no longer monitor adherence to some of the set standards. Right Honorable Speaker, factors of production are not safeguarded. What the poorest of the poor has, Chivanja in Uganda, or land, is not safeguarded. So, where we are coming from the starting point, is not safe. There is no safety. We need to invest in the security and safety of the land tenures, of the land rights of our people, because this is the first factor of production. But when you look at the programs, the way they are funded, for example, the parish development model, tenure security rights have not been helped. District land boards, they are as poor as I don't know, using clients' money to process activities. Let's try to ensure that factors of production that enable our poor of the poor are able to function, and then our people are able to change their livelihoods. Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Achut.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker, and I thank the committee for the report. My first issue is on the budget performance, specifically on absorption. When you look at the report presented on page 22, 7.1% of the funds were not absorbed, equivalent to 2.1 trillion Uganda shillings. We are here today talking about shortage of medicines, broken roads, but we have 2.1 trillion shillings that we have failed to absorb. When you go deeper into this same report, under the development external, we did not absorb 30%, equivalent to 1.4 trillion Uganda shillings. That is money which is borrowed. That is money which we're paying interest. And when we do not absorb it, we still have to pay the interest. And I want the minister to tell us how much do we pay when we fail to absorb these funds. We're talking about interest on domestic arrears, but there's now interest on non-absorbed funds. When you go deeper, the impact of this, one of the reasons are delayed releases from the ministry.
UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Set to transport to the wrong person? Here's how to reverse it with MTN Mobile Money. Dial *165#. Select My Account. Select Initiate Reversal. You will see your last 3 transactions. Select the transaction you want to reverse. Enter your mobile money PIN and you'll get an SMS confirmation that the transaction has been blocked from being withdrawn. And that's it. Please note, only transactions that haven't been withdrawn can be reversed.
Did you know cancer is one of the major non-communicable diseases in Africa, raising up to 18 million cases globally? Ministry of Health, in partnership with the Test and Treat Laboratory Initiative with Uganda Consumers Organization, bring to you the Africa Cancer Test and Treat Initiative Conference under the theme Enhancing Cancer Awareness, Early Detection and Diagnosis for Quality Cancer Prevention and Control at Hotel Africana, Kampala from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Proudly sponsored by